Hey, White Sox fans, it's Brett Ballantini here hosting South Side Sox podcast number 36. And I'm here with Bill Meincke. We're not best friends because I've just got to know him, but don't worry. Bobby, Coco Colletti, I will not steal him away from the Big Blurt podcast. Yes, it is Bill Meincke from the Big Blurt. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. This is going to be a blast. I'm excited.
Now, originally, we were also going to have your partner in crime, your new partner in crime, fellow South Side Sox podcaster and writer, Will Allan, who you were with at the ball game last night.
That's right.
And who one of you, I think it might have been Will, but one of you sent in a photo that we ended up just putting on our game thread. So you guys were the stars of our game discussion. And, well, I guess part of the reason why we put this together and why I even tried to get in touch with you, a week or so in advance when I heard you guys were going to the game was, hey, you guys are going to be the first guys breaking the tape on any sort of ball game attendance. I know we got at least one regular commenter who's going to be at the home opener and probably the whole home slate. But as far as I know, nobody else on staff, obviously, has gotten to a game. So I guess the first thing is, what was the experience, like for you guys? How different was it? How good was it to be back?
Well, first of all, I will say that hands down, the best to be back at a baseball game. Like it's such a feeling that I don't think I'll ever experience before, because hopefully we don't have to go through a pandemic or anything like that. But just arriving at the stadium and seeing people walk to the gates and showing their tickets and going through security, which was very light there, but just walking through and just having the smell of hot dogs hit your nose and just seeing people yell and scream and batting practice was going on when we arrived. It was honestly, it felt good, and we both kind of looked at each other and were like, this is the best. This is very cool. And that was our first time both going into Angels Stadium. We had not been there. We had only driven by before, but they have the two giant hats out front, the big baseball hats. But just walking in, you're like, this is great. And of course, in Southern California, there was tons of Sox fans there too, which was even more amazing. Just walking in and saying, "Go Sox." So there's only 9,000 fans altogether.
Yeah, it's funny that people consider Anaheim to be this house of horrors for the White Sox. I understand the regular season, it's been rough, including that series, which we will discuss in greater detail, including in greater detail last night's game where you were seeing it live. But, you can't get too uppity about Angel Stadium, given that there's some really, really sweet 2005 memories there. So, you sort of got to put to the side this idea that, oh my God, every time we find a new way to lose in some kind of exotic manner in the regular season, because, geez, it's got to be near and dear to all our hearts, given the fact that pretty nice run out there in the ALCS.
That was one of the first things I thought of too, is just that 2005 series. And I was wondering if they held any animosity throughout, but they were pretty quiet. I mean, there was maybe a few hecklers here and there, but obviously we didn't show up for more than half the game, so they had nothing to heckle us about. Yeah. But I will say I was like wondering, is anybody going to bring this up that over or almost 15 years ago, the AJ Pierzynski dropped third strike or anything like that?
Was there anything that was like off-putting or negative about the experience? I mean, obviously the overriding excitement of just getting to a game is going to be pretty cool, but was there concern about people in the park maybe not adhering to masking, or was there anything that flagged you like, I don't know?
So Will and I discussed this too, even on the way home. It was hard being there with masks on and separated from people, and there was a lot of people that were just switching seats and people with masks below their nose and all that stuff. So you had to scan a QR code for hot dogs and for drinks, so you couldn't go up to and pay with cash or anything like that. It was different. Obviously, you're so happy that you're watching baseball live. This is one of the coolest things ever. Just seeing a game for the first time in almost 2 years, and then getting there and just kind of, but it was different, and it did suck that this was under different circumstances than before. Again, like I said, there was only 9,000 people there. They were pumping audience sounds through the speakers. So anytime the Angels came up to bat, they would have audience sound. And of course, the regular crowd would be like cheering, but it wouldn't sound. It would just sound like a regular like one person clapping when they come up. So like, yeah, that they were pumping that noise, and we were sitting right in front of the speaker too, so it was even worse for us. But you couldn't. There were Sox fans all around us, and when the Sox got their 4 unearned runs, we couldn't high five. Of course, Will and I high five, but the Sox fans right next to us, you're kind of like, all right, it's like you can't do the high five, which is obviously a great thing. You don't want to be touching hands, but it also felt very strange, because that's what, when you're at Comiskey or at the salary rate, guaranteed rate, I call it all 3 things. You want to be able to like go up and high five and say like go Sox, and like jump up and down with other people you don't know, but obviously here it's a different story.
Clearly, you are not faking your excitement to be back. If you guys were high-fiving over unearned runs, you guys were excited to be back. There's no doubt about that. Let's talk about how bizarre that was. I was foreseeing, I think I even tweeted, I was foreseeing extra innings, runner on second, Sox bunt them over, sacrifice fly in. So that's 3 singles in the game, 5 unearned runs, and then, you got to close them out, because I just wanted to see a game that probably has happened, but I cannot imagine it's happened many times. But just the fact that the offense was, clearly the offense did not know you and Will were there.
That's true. We got a couple waves from Luis Robert, though. He pointed at us, and we were very excited about that. He did not show up at the plate, though. They looked, I think it would be the first time ever, right? A team gets 5 unearned runs and could win a game, which I
think, especially on 3 singles.
Yeah, and it's weird that Billy Hamilton was one of the guys that got those singles. Watching those guys, it was clear that they could not figure out which way the ball was going when it was being thrown at them. Any changeup, any slider that was thrown, they swung and they missed. Abreu did a couple times. Luis Robert looked awful when he was swinging at these sliders, and it was first pitch fastball, and then the next 3 pitches were sliders. So it's clear that they weren't on top of things, at least the offense.
Yeah, and Ohtani at some point like shifted into like he's not going to go gas. I know I don't know if they were different pitchers, but they're all about the same speed. But he went off speed, low 80s to your mean. I want to say 3 or 4 in a row, and he was lost on that too. I understand you got to probably sit red when a guy's throwing 100 miles an hour, but even the relievers, they did not seem to adjust very well to get much barrel on the ball, which is unfortunate, because this team, the one thing we thought it had in its back pocket was offense and contact and runs.
Yeah, that's right. And it was, having Will being a former pitcher himself right next to me, calling all the pitches that are coming from the Angels, you would expect that, these guys are professionals. They should be able to hit this. If Will's also calling it too, because Will was like, next pitch is going to be a 92-mile-an-hour single. That was exactly it. That was the one, and Luis Roberts swung and he missed. So like, it was, you expect a lot more out of these guys. Also, you're 4 games into the season. Sure, every game counts, or they're just getting started. You can argue either way, but these guys are professionals, and they are supposed to be one of the best teams in the American League. So there's obviously something they're going to have to do to kind of figure out a way to make contact with the ball.
Well, what did you think going in? Obviously, there's all the hype and the excitement about Ohtani, playing both hitting and pitching in a way that isn't the way you see it in the National League, meaning he is a threat and he's batting second. But it seemed like going in, given the fact he pitched 1 game in the spring, had really had a rough run of it for a couple of years, including his injury that took him out for a year, and made it a question whether he would even, go back to pitching. It certainly seemed like a scouting report would say, all right, this guy's got stuff, but I can't imagine they were prepared for him to be as good as he was, even though he was a little wild. But that said, okay, if you got to punt those 5 innings, which they didn't because they ended up having that bizarre error ridden rally, but you'd think then you would be able to feast and get something together on the against the bullpen. So it was they didn't show up for you guys. They didn't show up for the national audience. They did not manage to somehow seize the narrative away from the Angels on the broadcast because unfortunately you delightfully live and in person watching the game did not have to withstand the ESPN broadcast, which was rough.
We got a lot of texts about the Ohtani love from the ESPN guys. And even during wasn't there a Giolito and he was doing an interview that they were just talking about Ohtani the whole time?
I mean, to me, there was a bunch of outrage, and that seemed to be a little bit of sensitivity on White Sox fans. Because I mean, let's face it, the guy had just broke 100 miles an hour. He took a fairly high fastball from Dylan Cease, who's not a soft tosser, and just turned on it 450 feet. Now, I understand if Lucas had been listening to the entire broadcast already, he'd be rolling his eyes before he hit the headset on. But the idea that he asks, that he was asked about Ohtani. I know Robbie Colletti was going bananas about it, like, oh my God, I can't believe you're expecting. And, a lot of people were ticked by that. And I thought, well, this is, I mean, not that he's supposed to say, oh God, I hope he kicks our ass. But the idea that, that was a terrible question to ask. It was a horrible broadcast. That was certainly to me, not the low light, but yeah, it was the idea. Even in the 5th, when the unearned run rally's happening, both announcers, Alex Rodriguez, of course, as well, they're like, oh, just one more bat. It's like they were sort of, you would have thought this was an Angels home broadcast. It's like, he's just got to get through one more batter. And there were a lot of weird tells in the broadcast. It was like, wow. I mean, if it was the Dodgers, if it was the Yankees, I get it. This is the Angels. I mean, I know there's a lot of Ohtani love, but come on, that part was weird.
Now, obviously the Angels they've always been around, but Will and I got there, we were both like, sometimes, and no disrespect, it's just because we're both from the Midwest and we focus on the AL Central majority of the time. But sometimes, or we turned to each other and we said that sometimes we forget about the Angels, that they're an actual team until we play them, until we realize, because, they have in the last few years have maybe competed a little bit, but it's been the A's primarily that have taken charge. And just like because we also live in LA now, that the Dodgers are the #1 team here. It is like, I guess, comparable to the White Sox and the Cubs. But being there too, there was a point, I think, right after that bizarre inning, that White Sox fans, not even in our section, there were a lot in our section, started chanting, "Let's go White Sox." And it was louder than the "Let's go Angels," which is like baffling because there were so many White Sox fans there, so many. And it was like people were jumping up and down when the 2 runs scored off Meincke's strikeout. And it was just like, it was weird. I think that was the most amount of White Sox fans I've seen at the opposing team game. That's
very odd, and that does not speak well to the excitement Angels fans have about their team. If they're showing up, let's even say, it still had to be 2 Angels fans for every Sox fan, right? I mean, The idea that the White Sox fans were that jazzed in a game that wasn't 15-0. They had practically got no hit. Were somehow more vocal about like a drop third strike.
There was a make the noise thing that came on the jumbotron, and it sounded awful because it wasn't a lot of fans cheering, so it sounded like a high school basketball game. I mean, that being said, there were a lot of Angels fans there, but there were a lot of White Sox fans that really clearly love baseball a little bit more than maybe the people that were there for the
Angels. Apparently. The at least the dropped third strike that led to the couple to Meincke getting on and continuing the rally was obvious, because I remember the ALCS. I was lucky enough to be there, and you're not able to see anything, and you just see AJ Pierzynski run to first base, and you're like, and everybody in the stands were like, what's happening? No call on the field to make it very clear. And I mean, that's sort of a magical moment. It's pretty rare, especially with the scoreboard telling you what to do all the time. And everybody now, I guess, I mean, that was 16 years ago, so everybody didn't have their phones to get replays or whatever, to be like, what's going on? And, just, it's good because he's on first base. It seems like it's a good thing, but, that's a strangely unforgettable moment because it's pretty rare in a game where just like, what happened? And, well, that was one of them. At least there was obvious like, oh.
It flew right behind him. I remember watching the AJ thing, and then like obviously you're super excited when that happens because it's your team, but also watching it now, I'm like, well, if they called it now, I would have been like, okay, like you're kind of like, oh, that looked like it could have gone either way. You don't know.
Yeah.
But it was so obvious, and the even more frustrating thing I think about that whole situation is that like that was our number 4 hitter. And he made no contact in the game. Maybe once he hit, like, popped the ball up, if I remember correctly. But obviously, heads up baseball playing, the ball runs behind. He's able to make it to first for sure. But that was almost embarrassing. Like, we're jumping for joy in the stands, but we look like a minor league team. Like, it was bad. I mean, it was like we went 106, like 1 in 161. Like, it looked like we were just like, that was our first win ever. It did not look good.
Yeah, if they had somehow won that game, you probably needed to. I mean, of course they would have been celebrating, but the smart play would have been just to sort of slink out of there like, okay, we won and I'm happy. I got the ticket stub, but that's still an embarrassing effort.
It really was. And we're sitting there, like, we had a couple Angels fans talk to us, and they were talking about how, they were like asking us if players were good, and which is, really cool. And that's a great thing about going back to live games too. You get to talk with fans and about players, but we want to be like, yeah, Luis Roberts good, and then he would strike out on the slider. Like, we want to be like, these guys are great, and then that, that stuff would happen. Like, it was kind of embarrassing to be like, yeah, this guy's really good. Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. But like, I think the brightest moment probably would have been the sinker from Aaron Bummer, which looked like his last season form, which was great. I mean, he was moving. There were some, I think the Angels fans were just as confused as White Sox fans to what Tony La Russa was doing with Dylan Cease and with the bullpen. Personally, I think Will and I both were kind of like, Dylan Cease should finish this inning and get this third out. It seems weird that you would bring Cody Hoyer in. Obviously, he gave up a home run, so, but it was like, it looked, and it might have looked different on TV, but it looked to us, and we were sitting in the bleachers, but it looked to us that Dylan Cease was maybe found his groove and maybe was towards the end of his rope, but could have gotten that last out.
Yeah, I mean, at least this would have been a start in the past where he might have taxed the bullpen for 7 or 8 innings. So the fact that he could even gather himself after that first inning and finish strong, I mean, it's nothing to shout about, but you got to look at it with guys like Cease, unfortunately, right now, is that it could have been worse. And yeah, it did seem like he had some momentum going. And here's the thing about Tony. That probably wasn't his most controversial decision with the bullpen in just that game. So it was a rough series for everyone, including the coaching staff and management, which is too bad. I guess that's what it's going to be when you go 1-3 and you're ballyhooed and heralded to start the season. But we are going to talk after the break about sort of encouraging things to take out of that first series and discouraging ones. Before we break, I will drop yet another useless piece of trivia about my experiences in Angel Stadium. I did go there once as a fan on the beat. The series I went there on the beat, I think I just went 1 year, maybe a couple of years, was Lucha Libre night. I was part of a Guinness World Record. Everybody wore Lucha Libre masks.
That's cool.
So there was 20, 30,000, however many it was, wearing them. Now, see, everybody else took theirs off. I was dedicated to the bit. I put my glasses on over the mask, and I want to say I at least had 7 innings of Lucha Libre coverage for that game. So come on, if you're going to get a free mask, which I do still have somewhere, I should have actually pulled it out for a Angels-ish broadcast, but that'll be next time. You might as well, come on, rip the thing off. Come on, stay dedicated to the bit. All right, Bill, we're going to take a break and get back to talking more of the good and the bad of the White Sox so far this season in just a second. Hey there, White Sox fans. We are back. It is South Side Sox podcast number 36. First time guest and co-host Bill Meincke with me. You usually see him and listen to him on the Big Blurt. He is also doing coverage for us on Wednesdays. He did that in spring training. He's taking that through the regular season. We'll probably see some other stuff from Bill as well, but definitely we're going to have that game recap coverage from him on Wednesdays. So before we get back into the White Sox, Bill, let's talk a little bit about how you came to the team as a fan, and then maybe what it's been like to sort of dip your toe into doing some of this writing and coverage of the team.
So my dad is a huge White Sox fan, has been a huge White Sox fan since the day he was born. I believe his parents were White Sox fans. He grew up in the Quad Cities in Western Illinois, and would travel to the games. He would take the train about 3 hours in and would go to games, which is pretty cool. But so it just naturally, my younger brother, and I have two older brothers that aren't really into baseball, but if they had to choose, they would choose the White Sox. My younger brother and I played baseball growing up, and we always would go to White Sox games. And even if we wouldn't even sometimes go to White Sox games, I remember one time we went to when there was a hurricane in Florida. The Marlins were playing somebody at the Cell, I think. So
right, that's right.
Too. Yeah,
that's right.
But my parents were White Sox fans. My mom's a White Sox fan too, and we just we would go to games constantly. And then around 2005, my parents got season tickets, and they've had them ever since. And anytime I go back in town, obviously I'm there. I think my little brother has season tickets now. And we go to spring training. So
that's pretty good timing around 2005, getting a season ticket. That's I want to get some investment advice from your dad. Now, I like to ask this when we talk about like dads and generational stuff. Who was your dad's like favorite player growing up as a lifelong Sox fan?
Nellie Fox. Big fan of Nellie Fox. Has his jersey and everything. So I remember we went to Sox Fest a couple of years too, and he freaked out over Billy Pierce too. He was a big Billy Pierce fan. So just seeing him light up like a kid too made me be like, this is great, this is really cool. And like my dad and talking, we're father and son, we have a great relationship, but I think a big thing for us to talk about too is baseball. We find like it's a great connector among many people, but we find that to be a way of just like, I don't know, we either release frustrations when the Sox are bad, or we talk about things that are good when the Sox are good. So it's really cool. Nellie Fox was his big guy growing up. So
yeah, that's a nice thing. I had that with my dad as well. Chico Carrasquel was his favorite, a little bit older, right. But absolutely. It's a fun, an unexpected perhaps as the younger of the pairing to see your parent be as excited. I mean, my dad is just in impulse. So, I mean, he'll run the aisles, he'll scream and yell to an obnoxious degree. But yeah, to be able to sort of see it also through his eyes when they're winning was fun. It's sort of an unexpected bonus to experience some of those highs. I guess the lows can be grisly too, but some of those highs, it's always a sort of a kick to say like, oh man, wow, I'm supposed to be acting like that. What's going on with that? So
it was interesting. I remember, when we were in high school or when I was living in the city after college, we would go to games and we'd be sitting there. My dad would be arriving late because of work, so he would always come in, but he'd wear a suit and tie to work, and he would always come in with his hat on and his jersey on, but also would leave his tie and stuff on. So it looked weird, but it also looked like there's a grown man that also looks like a boy. So.
And if you need to you need to break away to cover something, and then he just rip the jersey off, and he's ready.
He's good to go. It's something happens right there, he's there. Yeah.
So what's some of your background? I think people are familiar by this time in sort of watching the and listening to the podcast that you and Will as well, both actors out in LA, but your writing background and has there been any sports writing before now, or just what's the feeling about sort of getting into doing some coverage of the White Sox?
Yeah, so obviously because of my parents, because my dad especially, I have a journalism mindset ingrained in me, so I've always been able to write pretty well because of that. when I went to school, I really wanted to be a blues jazz musician for right away, which is a very weird thing coming out of high school for a kid to want to do that. But I went to Western Michigan University for a year and then ended up transferring to Columbia College so I could be closer to the White Sox.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I got an internship at Second City and I got a free improv class and I kind of started my acting bug and, from there continued acting, just commercial work around the city. I was involved on the crew of Chicago PD for a few seasons. And then along with acting and improv, I was a writer with a few groups there. So I'd write plays and would write sketch comedy. But slowly over time, that journalism bug kind of came in too, and I would start to contribute. And I've written a lot of stuff that I would submit to or whatever. But as far as sports writing goes, it's only been within the last year and a half, last couple of years. I also being in LA, write for a website that represents the Kings. So the Kings, it's called kingsnation.com, but it's for the LA Kings for hockey. So that's kind of something I've been doing. And then because of my love of baseball and because Rob had also been involved with South Side Sox, I was like, this is, I'd love to help out and, reaching out to you and you being so gracious to help me out and give me an opportunity. It's a dream come true because who wouldn't, as a baseball fan and a writer, who wouldn't take the opportunity to write about baseball?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no doubt about that. And we're lucky to have you and happy to have you. So we're looking forward to a lot of very successful Wednesdays. Hopefully you can run the table on Wednesdays. We might need you to, because as we seg back into the actual White Sox ball club, which is 1-3, although as we went on air, I believe the Sox were up 1-0 at least on Seattle in tonight's game. So let's hopefully they can at least take 2, if not sweep, and come home with a winning road trip after a rough start. But let's start positively, Bill. Optimism coming out of the first series, a little hard to find, but there were some good things. Certainly in it, all the games were close. Obviously stole 1 win out of it, but what are you taking sort of encouragingly out of a 1-3 series?
Well, so there's a lot of people that think Tony La Russa is messing with some things to try to find the right combination of guys that'll get wins, which is fair, but that's also what spring training was for. That's why we have that. I don't look at the last series against the Angels in a positive way. I think, yes, we did get a win, but we won 12-8, and we gave up 8 runs, and that's not okay. So our sticks came alive, and I wish they would have come alive another game. But I think there are some positives. Obviously, Yerman Mercedes goes 9 for 14, which is great. But you also wonder, this guy that we don't know that has been with the White Sox for a few years and hasn't been up, is he going to continue doing what he does? Vaughn really didn't show up, and you're kind of hoping this guy would show up. Like I said before, Aaron Bummer's sinker is there, which is a positive. But just watching the game live too last night, I think that it was a weird feeling, like we just don't necessarily have what we need to have, and maybe Eloy is the key where he gets taken out. But I think the positive is that we know that we're not this bad, and we don't need to be this bad. And I think everybody's going to start working on it. I mean, you could see guys last night that were frustrated themselves. Luis Robert, for sure. You could see it in center field. He was also frustrated with the pitch calling because he would always do this when there was a ball called when it should have been a strike.
We don't want to introduce the third party issues, like things like weather or the fact that you weren't given seats in the front row and you were forced to sit a little bit further back in the outfield. But I think it would be remiss to ignore the fact that the umpires didn't have a particularly good series, and the calls did seem to disproportionately harm the White Sox. I believe on the, and forgive me, I don't even know what the site is, but there are definitely sites out there grading each home plate umpire job. I believe the home plate ump in last night's game, although I guess it turned out it didn't matter because they lost by 3, his calls or his missed calls cost the White Sox 2+ runs. And that's not going to help anybody. Now, again, you cannot point your finger at that, but it's some of that gray area stuff that is still fair to acknowledge, because this obviously wasn't a series, even though it was a 3 out of 4 loss, not something you're say, oh my God, this team doesn't have it. This is, I'm quitting on this team. Tony doesn't. I mean, there obviously everybody is due criticism. La Russa with being unfamiliar with the replay, timing and call. Some of the moves, whether maybe a quick hook or some of the choices he made out of the bullpen. You could argue maybe the lineup, even though he pretty much declared going in, I want to give everybody some run. That must just sort of be his thing. And I'm not sure you can blame anybody for wanting that, especially with some young guys in there. You want to definitely not have them sitting for 2, 3, 4 games before getting their first action. And, listen, the games were close, and the team, as you saw them getting frustrated, wasn't lashing out. There wasn't behavior that made you think, geez, nobody's in control of this clubhouse. Certainly they seem to be binding together. And I got to say, even though it seemed eerily reminiscent of Ricky Renteria, not just in the poor bullpen management, but in the backing of the team. I mean, you saw La Russa without any hesitation, talk, even though it seemed somehow incongruent, where he's saying, I'm very proud of the fight in this team, after this heartbreaking loss. That is, at this point in the season, I think what you want to hear the manager to say. And for a guy who, I don't know, could be doing a lot of other things, the fact that he is pretty much in the trenches there with his guys as he's trying to really force stitch this chemistry with his team. I mean, I got to say, I was by no means in favor of the hire, but I do have to say, certainly off field, he's done about everything I would hope that he would. And I'm frankly surprised he seems to have tried to integrate himself as well as he has with this team.
Yeah, because I know there was definitely a lot of talk about how he was not going to fit in, especially with Tim Anderson and the young guys. And they praise the guy now. They talk highly, they speak highly of him, and it's cool to see. The moves he's been making have been a little bit weird. So you obviously wonder, like, okay, he's got to wipe off the rust a little bit and get to it. He's definitely trying to figure out, I think, the groove of this team, and I think each player's trying to figure out their own groove too. I totally slipped my mind, but Michael Kopech, another great positive out of this series too, and Crochet. Because those guys are the future, and they are eventual starters. And to see them perform the way they did, just in the bullpen, just like, I'm excited not just for the future of the season, but also for the next few years to come.
Yeah, my eyes aren't completely sharp, and I definitely don't have a scout's eye. But when you compare Garrett Crochet, who seems to just, when he chucks it, it's just whoosh, fast, like something out of Major League or a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Kopech has that strange thing where it almost seems like about halfway to the plate, it picks up. It's really scary. I'm frightened for the batters, because, I mean, not that what Crochet does isn't just as scary, but the idea that it's sort of like, it seems like it's gaining velocity. I don't know if that's like some kind of like rising fastball effect or whatever it is. It just freaks me out when I see it, and it's really nice to see.
Yeah, watching him, I'm like, it reminds me of playing wiffle ball when I was younger, and you would throw the fastball, and then it would just, and you're like, what? You're like, how did you get that movement? Like, that's crazy. His stuff moves so well, and so does Crochet's. They're both very young, talented guys. And it was surprising to see Crochet come up as fast as he did and just show up last year. And but the good thing is, like, I think the guys they have in the bullpen will also help them. Bummer, first 2 years with Sox was not great. Found a couple pitches, and now he's great. And just for them to be able to also teach the younger guys about adapting is huge. So yeah.
It might surprise you to hear, Bill, that I did go undrafted in the Major League draft, but had there been a wiffle ball draft, I might have stood, especially if it was 40 rounds, I think I would have stood a chance of getting drafted.
Okay. I am, if I remember correctly, and I am convinced, but my brother disagrees. But we had a wiffle ball league in our friend's backyard. I'm positive I threw a perfect game, and he says absolutely not. But I'm absolutely positive it was a perfect game.
I don't think you forget stuff like that. I'm on Team Bill on this one. I'm pretty sure you're not going to forget a perfect game. Come on, bro.
I was playing with the wind. There was a slight gust in the air, and I was using it to my advantage.
And you started a ball behind a guy's ear by 3 feet and it cracked across the plate. That's sweet. I think you stood a chance of getting drafted too, but you might not have been aware of it, but you might have stood a chance too. We've talked a lot about discouraging, but I will say one thing, you know, there's been frustration with the pitching staff in general. And I think sometimes it's a little too easy to let the bullpen off the hook when, because I'm going to be quick to point out, hey, you had 4 pitchers and 1 made it to the 5th inning, I believe. And that is not going to help, no matter how strong your bullpen, that's not going to help anything out, especially just breaking the season. But at the same time, I mean, the bullpen wasn't asked to put out fires in the 2nd inning either. And they weren't super taxed because they have so many arms, really. I mean, it seemed like there were some weird protection moves and non-protection moves. Evan Marshall went back to back, even though he saw, I think, just 3 batters in the game. Then he went back out, and that's the game where he got knocked up a little bit. But I mean, this is the rotation's what it is, and it's not strong. There's no way to get around that. It's not a strong rotation. Let's hope it could be a strong rotation, but it definitely isn't. And so unfortunately you need this strong bullpen to sort of patch some of the holes in that rotation. Hopefully if Carlos Rodon can be the guy, that's going to do a lot to help. But even still, you've got Lance Lynn being very inefficient in the spring and in his first start. Dallas Keuchel, I'm not sure what we're going to get with him this year because he had this truncated spring and he did not look good in his first start. So fingers crossed for his second start in Seattle. But you know, we're not going to be able to use an excuse of, well, geez, the bullpen's going to be too taxed because the starters aren't going long enough, because that's what they're there for. And that's why it's so stacked. That's why apparently we decided to spend on a closer to make a strong bullpen devastatingly strong.
Yeah. It was weird to see him pull, like I said before, Will and I were wondering why he's going out for the 5th inning. And it was strange to see because we're right by the bullpen for both teams because the Angels Stadium has bullpens right next to each other. But just watching them, they would get up, they would stretch, and you're like, okay, maybe one of these guys is coming in, going to do some long relief. But then they would all sit right back down. It was very weird, and it was like playing mind games with us because we're like, okay, we're going to see Ruiz come in, and then Ruiz would sit down, or like, you know, he eventually did, but it was so weird. And I mean, I agree with you. I don't think, you know, Lynn hasn't been great, and I hope Dallas Keuchel is the same form he had last year, but who knows? And the 2 guys I think this really relies on now is Dylan Cease and is Carlos Rodon. Those are the guys that are going to push us a few games over, hopefully, the Twins. And if they can't show up, then I think we're kind of screwed in that towards the end of the season. It's super frustrating because one of our biggest team strengths, if not our biggest, is our bullpen, right? And so when you have our starting pitchers who I think at least 3 of them have thrown complete games before, they can't go 5 innings. And Tony's trying to save their arms, but also like we're gonna have to rely on these 12, 13 guys that are sitting out in the outfield, you know. And if we use them too soon, like you don't want to overuse Crochet and Kopech because they have young arms.
They might be starting.
Yeah, really. Yeah, seriously.
Use them, Tony. You might need them. Yeah, I think there was a little discussion on one of the game threads about how, you know, Lance Lynn had pitched like 800 games in a row. He'd thrown at least 100 pitches, and Tony took him out, I think, with 99, or took him out short of that. I'm like, okay, well, fine. But first of all, it's the first start. And second of all, then don't be struggling to get through 5 innings and pushing triple digit, you know, pitches. And this is sort of simple. I mean, it's not like he struck out 15 guys. And so his pitch count somehow was getting up. These guys, I mean, I wouldn't say it's nibbling either, but you know, Ethan Katz has got, I mean, we're going to have to do like just like a control basics or something, because it's all right if maybe a couple of these guys can only get us through 5 or 6 because the bullpen is so tough. But when it's like 4 guys that are doing it, you know, we're dead.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about that last night too. I was like watching Cease pitch, you watching all the guys pitch, really, you were kind of like, just throw it in the strike zone. Like whether it's just a fastball or whatever, just throw it in there. Because if you think you're going to lose this game, that was kind of the vibe towards the end of the game, even though they had tied it. Towards the second half of the game, you're kind of like, oh, the energy is like completely out of the White Sox here, and so they haven't been able to hit or anything like that. But if you have that mindset, at least put it in the area where an out can be made. And I think that's one thing that they're missing. They were not trusting their stuff, and if they did trust their stuff, they threw it out of the zone. And again, the umps didn't do us any favors, but still, it's kind of like, just again, if we're going to lose this game, put it where they can hit it.
Yeah.
Hopefully, they hit it right at Madrigal or something. Right?
And people are going to ding me because it's like, well, yeah, if Luis Robert doesn't have a ball bounce off his head, well, then Lance wins pitch count. So, and I get it. I mean, obviously, things aren't going to go perfectly. I'm not killing him for it, but the truth is, you got to pitch around some of that stuff too. And I know whatever the cliche is, like pitching to contact or whatever dumb thing that is. And granted, it's not like the defense is given perhaps the starters the most confident to sort of pitch to contact, but at some point versus getting yanked from the game, you might think, all right, let's see. I mean, you don't want to just throw a home run ball. Okay, I get it. And I can't pretend to be in the mind of a major league pitcher, but you think at some point, listen, you got to get it close enough to, I don't know if the whole thing about velocity and the spin rate is getting this momentum in the game where it's just like, you just got to kill every batter. But I think there's something to be said for lasting longer in the games, trusting your defense, even though, again, perhaps the White Sox didn't earn that trust in the first series. And the truth is, it's just not sustainable for these guys, even just to get 5 innings. That's still going to tax this bullpen, even with the arms they have. So I certainly hope this sort of like trial run first way through the rotation is just that. And we see much longer starts from here, because that, to me, coming out of it is one of the more troubling things.
Yeah. And I will admit that Dane Dunning came up in conversation multiple times last night about, if this Lynn thing doesn't work out, and Dane Dunning is a great pitcher, or at least it was the pitcher he was last year. He had a 3-something ERA, right? So like that's a guy that like could have been a number 5 or number 4.
Yeah. You're not going to say, okay, 2021, those guys are equal. But the truth is, if Lynn is going to struggle to get through 5, listen, Dane Dunning could have struggled to get through 5.
Right.
Totally. And he probably would have done it maybe a little more sophisticated because he had to. He didn't have as much of a leash to, with a younger arm to, and a recovering arm to go, 100, 110 pitches. So yeah, we had that. So let's hope what we got and what we gave away, what we got is something that's going to get us, 10%, 20% better pitcher. He doesn't have to be a Cy Young finalist. He doesn't have to win 20 games or strike out 200 guys, but 4 2/3. Yeah, I'm not down with that either.
The one thing throughout this whole last series that I noticed is that our pitches have been up. Like last night when Dylan gave up his home run to Ohtani, that was at the letters. He threw that right in the middle. And that's why Ohtani. But our pitches have been up. And last night, the Angels, seeing it live, I think Robert, Abreu, anybody else that struck out, their pitches were all towards the plate. They were all down at the bottom, and they were throwing low. And I think that was a big thing too. I think our guys can't hit low, and our pitchers are throwing high. So that doesn't spell. That spells disaster. It doesn't.
Yeah,
it's not safe at all.
No, it got us 1 out of 4. So yeah, let's hope that translates. And listen, Seattle ought to be, and I'm not aware of the score of the game. So, and of course, this is publishing tomorrow. So, hey, it's a win or loss. Let's just say, what a game by the White Sox, man. They really put it back together, Bill. It's really nice to see the offense come together the way they did.
I'm
feeling a lot more relieved.
Yeah. Wow. This season's going to be great.
Masterful. Hey, the 2-3 White Sox are ready to sweep that series. So let's do it. But let's hope that they can get healthy on Seattle, because they have to. Let's face it, Seattle is a team that you need to get healthy off of, even on the road in a really breakneck first week, sort of dealing with the adjustment to some injuries and some guys getting in there for the first time. Hey, that can also mean no fear, no hesitation. That's what Yermin certainly did for 8 at-bats plus. So, I hope if there's any team to get healthy off of, let's not wait to get back home. With all the hullabaloo there, even playing weaker teams, let's get back over 500, because hey, you can't afford to, you can't afford, they've already shipped a couple games out of those famous Hawk Harrelson 60 that you're going to, they're going to go either way. Well, we've already had a couple go the other way. So you can't afford to have too many of those run out of the hourglass. That's for sure.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we don't do any famous little like trivia jazz, or let's talk about football or soccer or whatever the hell you and Colletti do. So we just wind this thing up. It's a point and shoot podcast, but thank you for hopping on. This is Bill Meincke, who's our regular Wednesday writer, and I'm sure we'll find reason to have him do some other stuff here and there. In fact, you're going to get to know him a little bit better on Wednesday first coverage, because he'll have his Meet the Players article running as well. So you'll learn what you didn't learn here in this podcast. You get a couple other pieces of trivia and a photograph, all sorts of stuff you can clip and save about Bill and put on your wall of South Side Sox legends. So look forward to that on Wednesday. And of course, not to bury your coverage, Bill, but of course, Thursday is a big day, home opener. So we're going to be running a pregame podcast, postgame podcast, just like we did for the Angels opener on the road. So we're going to have, again, breakneck, ridiculous, wall-to-wall, kill the managing editor coverage continuing through at least Thursday. So look forward to that as well. But that's only after you've read and digested and broken down Bill's coverage of what will certainly be the third game in a sweep of the Seattle Mariners. We recorded it, so it
has to happen now.
It's going to happen now. So way to go, White Sox. Congratulations. Way to bounce back from Anaheim. That's awesome. And thank you, Bill, along with Will in absentia, for being for being first couple staff members actually get to a game. I don't know how many more of us might still this year, but you broke the tape, you got in there, you walk away 0-1, which is lame, but at least you were there, reported from the game, and now we're hearing more about it from you here and now.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everybody, again, big week, of course, all leading up to Thursday. So hopefully on Thursday, we'll be looking at the winning White Sox team, moving up in the division and pushing for first place in a victorious home opener. We'll have wall-to-wall coverage on Thursday, but of course, we always have wall-to-wall coverage here at South Side Sox because we're idiots. We don't know what else to do. We just keep on working for you. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and thanks for reading. And for Bill Meincke, he'll be back. Don't worry, he'll be back. This is Brett Ballantini, and keep on listening.